Okay, good morning, students. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Okay, in the last class, we have seen what are the important components of Hadoop as HDFS and MapReduce. And we started comparing MapReduce with traditional systems like RDBMS. We have seen the differences between these two frameworks in with respect to the structure of the data, access to the data, speed of processing. With respect to all these criteria, we understood the differences between MapReduce and RDBMS. Now let us also compare Hadoop components with grid computing and compare the same components with volunteer computing also and see what are the differences, why the existing technologies like grid computing and volunteer computing couldn't help us in some aspects which gave rise to Hadoop components that are HDFS and MapReduce. So what are the drawbacks of existing technologies and how they are met with, how these requirements are met with these new components of Hadoop, that we are going to understand today. And also we are going to throw a light on a brief history of Hadoop. So let us first understand what are the differences between grid computing and MapReduce. So grid computing is also called as high performance computing, and these communities have been doing large scale data processing for years, right? In the previous years, in order to process data faster, in order to analyze the data faster, we used to use this kind of grid computing. Grid computing is nothing but it is a name used for distributed computing. So whenever you distribute the computing power, whenever you distribute the processing task across various computers, then we call it as distributed computing, or we use grid of computers in order to perform this processing task simultaneously. So we call them as grid computing or high performance computing, right? So these have been doing large scale data processing for so many years in the previous days. Okay, so they use application programming interfaces that are APIs as message passing interface, right? When the computation is distributed, when the processing is distributed across multiple computing nodes, means across multiple computers or processing units, then in order to communicate between those tasks, when a main problem is divided into multiple tasks, those tasks have to communicate within each other, right? When I delegate you some work and you start working in a team, students have to interact with each other, right? In order to perform the task as a team. In the same way, whenever some problem is distributed, whenever some processing task is distributed across different nodes, those nodes have to interact, right? So they use APIs, they use application programming interfaces as message passing interface. In order to pass messages between the processing units, in order to communicate between the processing units, they use MPI, that is message passing interface, and for that they take help of application programming interfaces, right? Application programming interface is like a server. When you go to a restaurant, whatever you want, you order the chef through a server, right? In the same way, application programming interfaces act as servers of your requests with the system, right? So the approach in HPC is to distribute the work across a cluster of machines which access a shared file system hosted by a shared storage area network. So what is the architecture they use here? They use storage area networks which access shared file system. So the basic approach in high performance computing is to distribute the work. You understood? Here data is not distributed. In high performance computing or in grid computing or in distributed computing, This work is distributed, data is not distributed. Work is distributed across the machines that form a cluster. So all the commodity hardware, all the processing units are interconnected in the form of a cluster, right? So across those machines, the task is distributed over an architecture that is managed by storage area networks, right? So this computing this computing task distributed across the nodes will communicate with each other in order to perform the entire problem statement, okay, in order to finish or execute a particular problem statement. Now, this works well for predominantly compute-intensive jobs. See the last point? This technique, this kind of framework, distributing the work across various machines in a cluster, that kind of framework works well for predominantly compute-intensive jobs. When the job is compute-intensive, when the task requires a lot of computational power, in such cases, frameworks like high performance computing or grid computing will work very well, but it becomes a problem when nodes need to access large data volumes, since the network bandwidth is the bottleneck and compute nodes become idle. Now what will happen when the volumes of data keeps increasing? When the computational task is intensive, okay, you're distributing the computational task across machines and getting the work done simultaneously in order to increase the processing power. But when the nodes need to access large volumes of data, the actual problem arises. Correct? So when the data volumes keep increasing, the data have to be transferred from between the nodes. The data have to be transferred between various nodes that are separate. In that case, the data have to be transferred across using some bandwidth. Now, if large volumes of data have to be transferred between the nodes, then the bandwidth utilization will increase. When the bandwidth utilization increases, it becomes a bottleneck, and when the data transfer between the nodes is delayed, then the computational nodes will become idle. Right? By the time the data is transferred from one node to another node, the computation nodes may sit idle. They may be idle without performing any processing task, means they are not utilizing their computational capacity up to what extent they can perform. Right? Their capacity is actually more, but they are sitting idle. Computational nodes are sitting idle because of bottlenecks in the bandwidths, and the transfer of data is delayed between one node to another node. These are the drawbacks of grid computing, and these can be overcome by using MapReduce. So let us see how it is being met. These drawbacks are being covered by MapReduce. MapReduce tries to co-locate. Understand this key term, co-locate. MapReduce tries to co-locate the data with the compute node, so data access is fast because it is local. So MapReduce main intention, MapReduce basic notion is to co-locate the data with the compute node, means the data is located at the node where the computation is done. Or you can understand the other way. Where the data is residing, the computation is sent to that particular node rather than passing the data. Rather than passing the data across the nodes by using bandwidths, you are passing computation to where the data is residing. Okay, that is the basic idea of MapReduce that has increased its capacity of quick processing. Okay, so MapReduce tries to co-locate the data with the compute node, so data access is fast because it is local, which is called as data locality. It gives importance to data locality. It sends the computation to the nodes where the data is residing, so that it can save from network bottlenecks, it can save from bandwidth congestion or delays that is caused by the bandwidth. Now, MapReduce operates only at the higher level, but this is one drawback. It operates as an abstract mechanism. Abstract mechanism means you can see what is happening at the front end, but all the background details are hidden from the programmer. It is hidden from the client. Okay, so MapReduce operates only at the higher level. The programmer thinks in terms of functions of key and value pairs, and the data flow is implicit. So whenever you want to understand what exactly is the mechanism that is followed, what is the approach that is followed, that is taken up by this MapReduce, it is very abstract. You just see what it is doing on the front end, but in the background, how the data is being passed between the nodes, how fault tolerance is implemented, what happens when a data node fails, what happens when a data node is corrupted. All these things are completely hidden from the client. Okay, so the data flow is also implicit. To perform all this analysis process, to perform the processing of data at the background, everything is done implicitly, which is hidden from the front-end user, which is hidden from the client. Okay, all this happens at a higher level. Now, coordinating the processes in a large-scale distributed computation is a challenge here. Why? Because, and again, we are just talking about distributed computing. Now, this kind of processes, data, when the data is corrupted, when a data node fails, when a fault arises, when, say, the data on a disk is lost, how such failures are handled. That requires large amount of coordination in a large scale distributed computation. It is really challenging in distributed computation. Failures also should be handled very gracefully. Means graceful handling of failures means when some failure occurs, the client should not be face any interruption in the processing that happens at the background, right? So whenever some failure occurs, it has to be handled very gracefully such that the client even need not be informed about the failure, but at the same time, he should not compromise with the reliability of processing. Whatever is being handled at the back end should happen very smoothly without the knowledge of the client that some failure has occurred at the background. This doesn't happen with grid computing, but it can be achieved by MapReduce, right? So coordinating this kind of failures, data corruption, data loss, or disk failures, or node failures, such kind of failures can be easily handled by MapReduce, but not by large-scale distributed computation. In order to handle such kind of interruptions in distributed computing, it is a humongous task. It requires large amount of coordination, but in MapReduce, it is set by default. It is organized by default. Everything that is happening in the background is very organized, and it happens by default in a very smooth manner such that the failures are handled gracefully. Okay, so MapReduce implements failure detection mechanisms through a shared nothing architecture. How is this failure detection mechanism handled by MapReduce? Again, you have to remember this keyword, shared nothing architecture. MapReduce implements failure detection mechanisms through a shared nothing architecture. What is the shared nothing architecture? There is no particular order of execution of the tasks. The tasks are independently executed. One task is divided into multiple tasks and sent on to multiple nodes where the unit of data is residing. Now, when that computation is done, there is no particular order that this work unit should execute first, or the second, or the next work unit should execute later. There is no such ordering and execution of the work units, but all the work units are independently executed. All the computations that are sent to the data nodes where the data resides are independently executed without any ordering in between them. Now you are understanding why we send the computation, right? Whenever you store the data on Hadoop platform, you divide the data into fragments. One large volume of data is divided into fragments or subunits, and each subset of data is stored on multiple nodes. Okay, this is what we understood in the previous classes. Now, when this data is stored on multiple nodes, access can be provided to all these nodes simultaneously so that the data access speed is increased. Okay, and because the data is residing on multiple nodes, when you pass the computation to all these nodes, they execute without any order. They execute independent of each other. But at the end, all the processing results will once again be consolidated by the MapReduce framework to give the client a comprehensive answer, to give the client a consolidated answer. Right? So they are not having any order in the execution of the sub computations. That is called as shared nothing architecture. Because there is no particular ordering in execution of the subunits, even though one node fails, immediately the MapReduce will search for a healthy node, puts it into place, executes the task, and finally it will send its part of result for consolidation to give the final result to the client. Okay, so MapReduce implements failure detection mechanisms through a shared nothing architecture. Nothing is shared between the nodes. Every node operates independently, but all the results are being consolidated by the MapReduce framework at the end to give a consolidated or a comprehensive answer or a comprehensive result to the client. Got it? But in message passing interface programs, but MPA programs have to explicitly manage their own checkpoint and recovery, which gives more control to the programmer, but makes them more difficult to write. What happens in distributed computing? In distributed computing, computation nodes will interact with each other through APIs by using message passing interface mechanism. They communicate with each other by using message passing interface mechanism. Now, how do they handle failures? They handle failures. They try to manage failures by using their own checkpointing and recovery. So they install checkpoints at frequent intervals. Whenever some failure occurs, they go back to the checkpoint and re-execute the task so that they don't lose integrity of data. They don't lose consistency in the data. Right? That is how they use checkpointing in distributed computing. But in this case, programmers may have good control over the mechanism, but makes them more difficult to write the processing tasks. Though the programmer is having more control on the distributed computing tasks, writing the programs in order to perform the processing or analysis of the data is difficult. But in MapReduce, everything is handled by the MapReduce framework, dividing the tasks, performing the processing, consolidating the results, and giving it back to the client. Everything happens at the background in a very smooth manner. Because MapReduce is programmed, because MapReduce is designed to maintain fault tolerance by default, to manage disk failures and data failures by default, to handle node failures by default, right? That is the difference between MapReduce and grid computing. Now, MapReduce might sound like a, one second. MapReduce might sound like a restrictive programming model. Yes, because there is no much control for the programmer to work with MapReduce, and MapReduce operates at an abstract level, at a higher level, and you don't have any control on the background mechanism. MapReduce might sound like a restrictive programming model, right? And large range of algorithms can be expressed in MapReduce, from image analysis to graph-based problems to machine learning algorithms. Though MapReduce might sound like a restrictive programming model, when you want to work with large amounts of data, when you want to work with fault-tolerant mechanisms in such cases, or when you want to work with varied set of algorithms, in such cases, you can use this MapReduce, because you can express large range of algorithms in MapReduce, and you can handle image analysis, graph-based problems, and large set of machine learning algorithms. All can be implemented by using this MapReduce framework. So though there is drawback that MapReduce doesn't give you much flexibility in terms of programming it, still it helps us to work with large volumes of data in a faster processing time. That is why you go for MapReduce for quick analysis or processing of data. Okay. Now let us move on to next kind of next kind of computing, traditional computing, that is volunteer computing, and compare volunteer computing and MapReduce. This is another important question you may be asked from this chapter, because volunteer computing is almost similar to MapReduce in most of the cases. But how is it different? What are the drawbacks of volunteer computing and how they can be overcome by using MapReduce? Let us understand this very clearly so that you can see or you can appreciate the features of MapReduce. Okay, so well-known volunteer computing project by name SETI at Home is being run by SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. SETI full form is Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. Now, what is SETI at Home? SETI at Home is a project. You can also Google it. You can go to the site and register yourself with this SETI at Home project and lend your CPU cycles for processing their data. Okay, you might have seen this Koi Mil Gaya movie. In that, they keep sending some radio telescope data, high frequency data, to a distance which is light years away from the Earth, and wanted to find some, wanted to know if there is some communication that is being sent back by the aliens, or by some extraterrestrial intelligence, or by some extraterrestrial life that is existing outside the Earth, right? In that case, they try to send some high frequency signals and want to know if whether they're getting any reply from other planets or other, say, celestial bodies other than Earth. Okay, so same thing they are doing here in SETI at Home. They are trying to analyze some radio telescope data in order to understand whether there is any life other than on Earth. Okay, so well-known volunteer computing project SETI at Home is being run by SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. In this project, volunteers donate CPU time from their otherwise idle computers to analyze radio telescope data for signs of intelligent life outside Earth. Okay, so they are trying to send high frequency signals and trying to analyze the data that they get back, whether they are having any signs of life outside the Earth. In this case, volunteers are donating CPU time in order to analyze that radio telescope data. Now, if you register on this site, you can lend your CPU time when your computer is idle. When you are in college or at night time, you may not be using your laptop. At such times, you can lend the CPU processing time to this kind of projects, where they give you work units and you just run the processing cycle for those work units, and the analyzed data results can be sent back to the project again, where they consolidate the results and try to analyze something out of it. Okay, so volunteers donate the CPU cycles here when their computers are idle. And other projects like this can, other projects that can be quoted here are Great Internet Mersenne Prime Search and Folding at Home. In Great Internet Mersenne Prime Search, they're trying to find out largest prime numbers. Okay, largest prime numbers means very large, say in terms of 20 digits or 30-digit prime numbers. For that, they have to check it. They have to check each and every number divisibility, right? For that, they require large computational power. And also folding at home. This folding at home is trying to analyze protein folds which will lead to some kinds of diseases. So they wanted to understand how the protein folds, how the genes actually mutate, giving rise to some kind of diseases. Okay, again, you know that human body is built with complex gene arrangements within, right? So they have to analyze large volumes of data in order to understand such protein foldings which lead to various kinds of diseases, right? These are other such projects which use volunteer computing. The volunteer computing projects Volunteer computing projects work by breaking the problem they are trying to solve into chunks called work units. Important term to remember here. How does volunteer computing work? They divide the problem, they divide the task they are trying to solve into smaller chunks called as work unit. Now, one work unit may be approximately 0.35 MB of radio telescope data. Now, these work units are sent to computers around the world to be analyzed. Who are these computers? People who have registered with the SETI at Home project and ready to donate their CPU cycles when their systems are idle. Right? So these work units are sent to those volunteers who donated their CPU cycles, and that work unit is run, or that work unit is analyzed on their computers, and that result is sent back to the project. Okay, so these work units are sent to computers around the world to be analyzed. Now, when the analysis is completed, what do? The results are sent back to the server and the client gets another work unit. Right? One work is assigned to you, to your CPU, and once it is analyzed, you can send it back to the project or to the server of SETI at Home project, and once again they'll give you another work cycle to run the processing, to process it and give back the results. As a precaution, now how do they believe? You're sending some data to an unknown person to be analyzed on his CPU and getting back the result. In such case, there is always scope for cheating. As a precaution to combat cheating, each work unit is sent to 3 different machines. See how they are trying to tackle this kind of discrepancies. They send each work unit to 3 different machines and needs at least 2 results to agree to be accepted. Okay, so same work unit is sent to 3 different machines and at least 2 machines results have to be same in order to accept that analysis result and consolidate into their project. Okay, that is how they combat cheating. Now, what are the similarities between volunteer computing and MapReduce? Let us first understand the similarities, then go for differences. Both volunteer computing and MapReduce use fragmentation technique, right? In volunteer computing also, you divide the task into work units and send those work units to CPUs across the world. In the same way, MapReduce also uses the same fragmentation technique. They divide the data onto various nodes and also they divide the computation and send it to nodes where the data is residing. Right? So both of them use fragmentation technique. That is the only similarity. But what are the differences? SETI at home problem is very CPU intensive. They require high computation power, which makes it suitable for running on hundreds of thousands of computers across the world, because the time to transfer the work unit is dwarfed, is made small by the time to run the computer, by the time to run the computation on it. So when you run when you compare the computation speed, or when you compare the computation task with the data transfer requirement, the computation is very high. The computation requirement, the processing power that is required is very, very high when compared to the data transfer rate. That is why they take the risk, or they take the trouble of transferring the data rather than bearing the computation at a single place. Okay, so they transfer the data onto CPUs across the world in order to perform the computation by utilizing the computation power of volunteer computers across the world. Okay, so the data transfer, though it is troublesome, though it requires more bandwidth, that is made small, that is dwarfed when compared to the computation power that is required to analyze that radio telescopic data. But volunteers are donating CPU cycles. Volunteers are donating CPU cycles, not the bandwidth. You have to remember this. Volunteers across the world who register to volunteer with this SETI at home project, they donate CPU cycles, they donate computational power, not the bandwidth. Okay, and MapReduce is designed to run jobs that last minutes or sometimes even hours on trusted, dedicated hardware running in a single data center with very high aggregate bandwidth interconnects. But what about MapReduce? Okay, volunteer computing, in volunteer computing, volunteers donate CPU cycles, but they are not bothered with the bandwidth. They are not bothered with the data transfer. But in MapReduce, it is designed to run jobs which will run for hours and hours of time, but on trusted machines, but on dedicated hardware running in a single data center with very high aggregate bandwidth in order to pass the computations between one node to another node with some interconnects between the nodes. Does this happen with volunteer computing? In volunteer computing, you are sending the data to untrusted machines, but MapReduce sends the data to trusted machines. MapReduce runs the jobs on trusted machines, not on volunteer machines, not on untrusted machines across the world. These trusted machines are hosted by a single data center, right? And they will have high aggregate bandwidth interconnects in order to transfer the data or computation. But in MapReduce, generally we don't transfer data, we transfer only computation across the nodes where the data resides, right? By contrast, SETI at home runs a perpetual computation. Perpetual computation means never ending. It doesn't end because the data volumes they're analyzing is very, very huge, very, very humongous. Okay, so by contrast, SETI at home runs a perpetual computation, large duration processing that is required on untrusted machines. Untrusted machines means you register with SETI at home, they send you some data to analyze. Do they trust you? No. But in order to combat the cheating, they have some mechanism put in place, like three volunteers will run the same task and 2 results have to agree upon. Okay, that is how they overcome cheating. But they don't have any other option than running on untrusted machines because they are in immense need of computational power, right? So SETI at home runs a perpetual computation on untrusted machines on the internet with highly variable connection speeds and no data locality. So you might have understood now the comparison between volunteer computing and MapReduce. MapReduce runs on trusted machines. SETI at home runs on untrusted machines. Volunteer computing runs on untrusted machines. And MapReduce works in a single data center on trusted hardware with same kind of connection speeds. But SETI@Home works with highly variable connection speeds. MapReduce works with data locality. SETI@Home, that is volunteer computing, has no data locality because data is passed to volunteers' computers to run and they are untrusted. Data is being transferred. There is no data locality notion, idea in volunteer computing, but MapReduce works with data locality. Right? These are the differences or similarities that we can find between volunteer computing and MapReduce. So in order to overcome this untrusted machine, in order to overcome the drawbacks of this untrusted machines used in volunteer computing, varying connection speeds, data locality problem, to overcome all these drawbacks, MapReduce came into picture. Okay, so there are some advantages of traditional computational techniques like distributed computing, volunteer computing, but there are disadvantages also. There are some drawbacks also, which can be covered by the components of Hadoop platform, that is HDFS and MapReduce. Now let us go to understand the brief history of Hadoop. You just have to go through the facts, that's all. Here I don't stress upon you to remember these facts. Here this just helps us to understand the evolution of Hadoop in a chronological order. But you need not remember each date or how many nodes have been used or how this Hadoop have evolved into such a powerful platform. You need not remember the facts. Okay, it's not a history subject. You just understand how it evolved, how people started working intensively on it, and how it evolved to the stage that it is existing in present days. Okay, if you understand that, it is enough for you. But you need not remember the dates thoroughly, right? So in 2004, initial versions of what is now Hadoop distributed file system and MapReduce was implemented by Doe Cutting and Mike Caffarella. We learned that Doe Cutting and Mike Caffarella are the inventors or fathers of this platform, Hadoop platform. And in 2004, the initial versions of HDFS and MapReduce were implemented by these two people. And in December 2005, Nash ported to the new framework. They initially started working on a web search engine, and slowly they started working towards this Hadoop platform. So Nash ported to the new framework in December 2005, and Hadoop ran reliably on 20 nodes. Okay, they started testing this Hadoop platform slowly by increasing the number of nodes. Initially, they tested it with 20 nodes and it worked reliably with the 20 nodes that have been tested. In January 2006, Doe Cutting joined Yahoo, and in February 2006, Apache Hadoop project officially started to support the standalone development of MapReduce and HDFS. So they dedicated the resources in Apache to work only on this particular project. So this started in February 2006, and Apache Hadoop project officially started. Officially, it has been launched in order to support the standalone development of these two components of Hadoop, MapReduce and HDFS. Now in February 2006, again, adoption of Hadoop by Yahoo by the grid computing team took place. And in April 2006, sort benchmark run on 188 nodes has been performed in approximately 47 hours. And this have been achieved by 10 GB capacity per node. And in May 2006, Yahoo set up a Hadoop research cluster with 300 nodes. When do we call it as a cluster? When various nodes are arranged at a place in by organizing them onto different racks, and all these racks put at a single location, they form a cluster. Okay, cluster of machines. Now if you want to increase the performance of the cluster, you can keep adding nodes with increased processing power, right? That is how you can scale up when new processing requirements come into picture. You just increase the capacity of the cluster by adding new nodes, by scaling it so that it can handle large processing of data, large processing tasks of the data, right? So in May 2006, Yahoo set up a Hadoop research cluster with 300 nodes. And again in May 2006, SORT benchmark run on 500 nodes, and it took 42 hours to complete it. So better hardware than April benchmark if we compare. In April, it has been only 188 nodes, right? But in May, they have increased it to 500 nodes, and by running the SORT operation on 500 nodes, they're able to achieve the results within 42 hours itself. And in October 2006, research cluster has been expanded to 600 nodes. And in December 2006, SORT benchmark run on 20 nodes in 1.8 hours, 100 nodes in 3.3 hours, 500 nodes in 5.2 hours. And when they increased the nodes to 900 units, they ran the SORT benchmark in just 7.8 hours. Okay, they have increased the capacity, they have increased the data, and the result have been achieved in 7.8 hours. So what they are doing is the task is being divided onto multiple nodes than making one node responsible to perform the processing task. Okay, so when the SORT benchmark, when they increase the data, they also try to increase the number of nodes, and at the same time trying to reduce the time of processing. Okay, so in January 2007, the research cluster has been expanded to 900 nodes now. And in April 2007, there two clusters have been set up, two research clusters have been set up, and each of them with 1,000 nodes. Together they made up to 1,000 nodes, two clusters of 1,000 nodes. And in April 2008, they won the 1 terabyte SORT benchmark in 209 seconds on 900 nodes. Now you see the drastic reduction in the processing time. They won the 1 terabyte SORT benchmark in 209 seconds in terms of just seconds on running it by running it on 900 nodes. Means they have run the task simultaneously on 900 nodes, and they are able to achieve the processing result in just 209 seconds. Did you observe the difference in the processing speed when the task has been divided across multiple nodes? In October 2008, loading 10 terabytes of data per day onto research cluster have taken place. And in March 2009, 17 clusters with a total of 24,000 nodes have been deployed. Initially, 2 clusters with 1,000 nodes they have deployed, and now that capacity have been increased to 17 clusters with a total of 24,000 nodes. And in April 2009, they won the minute sort by sorting 500 GB of data in just 59 seconds by running it on 1,400 nodes, and the 100 terabyte sort task, they have run it on 173 minutes by using 3,400 nodes. Now you can understand, as the nodes increased, as the computation power increased, the time taken to process large volumes of data kept on reducing because of dividing the task onto multiple units, because of dividing the data and providing simultaneous access. The data is not residing on a single node. The large volume of data is divided onto multiple nodes, and the computation is passed on to all those nodes so that they are analyzed simultaneously, and the result is given back in no time. Okay, they achieved that quickness in the analysis or processing power, right? In next class, we'll see what is Apache Hadoop and what are the other projects under Apache Hadoop and the Hadoop ecosystem, and also the releases of Hadoop 2.0 version and 2.0 version, and what are the differences between them and what features they originally have. That we are going to cover in next class. Any doubts, students, still here? Students, did you understand the difference between distributed computing, volunteer computing, and MapReduce?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now the data is divided into work units in which kind of computing? Let me see who will answer very quickly.
MapReduce, ma'am.
Data is divided into work units in which type of computing? Yes, MapReduce as well as Ginger as well as
Grid computing, ma'am.
grid computing data is divided, Ravishankar. Computation is divided onto multiple nodes in distributed computing. Data or task is divided into work units in volunteer computing as well as MapReduce. Okay, but data is not divided into multiple parts in distributed computing. Computation power is distributed. Computation power is divided onto multiple nodes and data is passed to those nodes to perform the computation. Data transfer takes place between the nodes in distributed computing, but data locality is followed in MapReduce so that data transfer is not required. Computation is passed to the nodes where the data is residing, but data is not transferred. Okay, in distributed computing, computation is distributed across the nodes so that a quick processing of data takes place. Now, in order to perform the computation, even the data is also transferred in distributed computing, but data transfer doesn't take place in MapReduce, or data transfer doesn't take place in MapReduce. Now, data tasks are run on untrusted machines in which type of computing? Data is being processed on untrusted machines in which kind of computing we discussed today? Distributed computing or volunteer computing or MapReduce? Deepika LG? Bhavisha?
Ma'am?
Did you hear my question?
Repeat once again, ma'am.
Kavya?
Half of the words are not getting, ma'am. Connection.
You're not getting the signal properly. Data is run, computation or data is transferred to untrusted machines in which type of computing? Volunteer computing or distributed computing or grid MapReduce? Yes, volunteer computing. In volunteer computing, data is transferred for computation onto systems which are untrusted, onto machines which are untrusted, right? And which mechanism uses data locality? Kavya? Data locality is used by which framework? Distributed computing, volunteer computing, or grid computing? MapReduce again.
MapReduce, ma'am.
MapReduce. Very good, Ravishankar. Data locality is being used by MapReduce. Data locality means data resides on multiple nodes and computation is sent to the nodes where the data resides, where the data is local, but data is not transferred anywhere. Through this, you can save on network bandwidths. You need not compromise with network bottlenecks. Okay, You can just keep the data safe at one place and only transfer computation rather than data. Okay, then we'll meet in the next class with upcoming topics.